Well, it's lovely to be able to chat with you about the show. I've seen the first 3 episodes, obviously, and just great. I mean, obviously, I run a site called Geektown, so completely my sort of genre. So I mean, I start off by asking, what possessed you to make a sci-fi TV series? Because I mean, it's a huge undertaking, and I've been going back through, and the last big adult spacefaring sci-fi series I can think of was probably Blake 7. So that's made in the UK,
which was incidentally one of my favorite shows as a child.
And
I think that anybody who, you know, I'm 49, I think anybody of my generation will feel a bit of that vibe as they watch the show. I mean, it is, I think the one thing that I loved Blake 7 when I was a kid was sitting down going, where are we going to go today? And that sort of visceral excitement. So that is quite a touchstone, I think, in terms of the sort of disparate gang, and they're off. Yeah, so it is. I mean, hopefully our sets are a little bit more
yes, less wobbly. Yeah,
less wobbly.
Yeah. No, I mean the set design is superb. I mean, and the effects, you know, all the effects work, I think, has been brilliant, and the cast is great. Speaking of the cast, was it always your intention to get a sort of such a diverse cast together?
Yeah, I mean, the shows I've always worked on before, we've always pushed for diversity in terms of casting, because you want to write something that reflects the world we're living in. Also, in terms of, you know, this show is set 120 years in the future, and all our research indicated that the majority of us are going to be mixed racial dual heritage by then. So it also felt like a truthful representation.
Yeah.
And also it means you just have an opportunity to get actors from all communities. I mean, you know, there are certain actors that I've been chasing for years. So to get them on the show, you know, to get Thomas Turgis and Sharon Duncan-Brewster in the show to me is just, you know, it's delightful.
Yeah, and I mean they're great roles as well, and there's a wonderful sort of balance of dark comedy as well as being sort of serious drama in there. What was your sort of approach to just coming up with the whole concept for it in the first place?
I was given the premise by another writer, Matthew Reed, because he knew that I'd always, you know, written female gang shows. And I'd expressed an interest to Sky that I wanted to work in science fiction because my daughter, she was 15 when we went to see The Force Awakens, and she's 17 now, but it was always that thing of, why are we not seeing those characters on the small screen? And I was like, no, it's true. You know, that there still hasn't been, you know, that kind of female-centric science fiction show on the small screen for years. So I did feel there was a space for a show like that. I was also really interested in trying to write a road movie in space where you had that propulsion and that intensity. So it was kind of those ideas coming together, really.
Yeah. So you've you've done sort of female-led shows before, but I mean, this is again a predominantly female-led cast for this. Is that also was that also the intention from the beginning as well?
Yeah, it was absolutely the intention. It was, I think there's a space there. These are stories I want to tell, and I want to tell them within genre storytelling. So you know, I think there are, you know, I spent last week watching WandaVision and shows like that, and I go, you know, there are more of these shows now, but we started work on this 4.5 years ago, and it certainly felt, you know, I as a writer, I'm interested in putting female storytelling at the heart of the show. So that was absolutely, you know, the intention from the start.
I mean, although it is a sci-fi, as a lot of sci-fi does, it touches on things that are going on in the real world as well. And it also brings in a lot of the family relationships. You know, you've got mothers and daughters in there on sort of both sides as well. Can you just talk a little bit about writing and crafting those relationships for the show?
Yeah, I mean, we always start with character. We go back to, before we even think about plot and setting, we start with who the characters are, their sort of psychological makeup, their wants and needs, their important relationships, their backstory. So, you know, we'd spent actually months doing the character work alongside the world building So, you know, the science fiction show, I mean, it's the biggest show I've ever worked on, just in terms of coming up with the world building, the look, the spaceship, the different dynamics of the goodies, the baddies, the character. But at the heart of it was that gang, and that everything kind of grew out of that dynamic. So that was the kind of bulk of the work, was working on the character arcs before we started to layer up the world building.
In terms of developing that world building, I mean, you've got this sort of somewhat interesting, somewhat dystopian thing going on Earth, but there's this sort of level above where they're all living. How much of that do you sort of build and map out that isn't directly on screen? Is there a sort of
there's tons of maps and documents. We have maps of the world. We worked a lot in terms of the research, as in terms of how much of the world would be flooded. We looked at futuristic architects in terms of how they would build the world. I mean, it's always easier, I think, with the world building to come from start from a position of research and truth, because I think otherwise it's really easy. You just get your references from shows that already exist. So we try to, in terms of the world building, base it on where we think the world will be, how will buildings evolve out of flooded UK, and obviously in terms of the spaceship, was working with our science advisors as, actually, if you were going to build a spaceship that was driven by an Alcubierre drive, what would it look like? And I was really obsessed with having a spaceship that wasn't silver and angular. I wanted something that felt different. I wanted like an old copper kettle flying through space, and I think that's what we've got. So
yeah, I mean, I was going to ask actually, how much in terms of the actual look of the show on screen, once you've written it, how much control do you have over you know, how everything, as the creator of it, how everything kind of looks and comes out?
Yeah, I mean, it's always involved in that. It's a conversation between me, the director, the production designer, and my other EP, Iona. And there were months of flying to our production designer in Dublin as he's drawing the spaceship, and then we're getting the science advisors in, and then we're building pretend corridors in the design studio to make sure that the kind of scale is right. So, you know, that was just probably the most fun I've ever had as a writer, because usually when you write, you know, they show you the set and it's a kitchen, whereas this time, you know, I walked into the studio in Manchester and there was a spaceship, and it's the most exciting thing.
Yeah, some of the cast have said that it basically is a spaceship, that set.
Yeah, it's almost 360, and we worked very, very hard to have the detail. If they opened a drawer, the right stuff was in there. So there was a lot of detail and thought, because, you know, with science fiction, you're asking your actors to make a really big leap, and it's quite exposing as a performer. It's not naturalistic. It's not sort of, you're asking for quite big performances and quite a big leap of imagination. So it was our kind of responsibility as the creators to give them an environment that enabled them to do their job as well as they could. So that was part of the thinking as well, in terms of building that spaceship.
In terms of the, you know, obviously there's a lot of VFX work that went in on this. Is that something that you have in your mind of like, how are they going to do this when you're writing it, or do you just kind of put it all out there and go, well, we'll let them figure it out? So if I have to cut it back, I'll cut it back.
I think on the first episodes, it's very much a leap of faith, but obviously, you know, we're starting to write stuff as we're beginning to make it, and our VFX team, we had the same VFX team across the whole show, so they are on set all the time. They've got their studio up in Manchester, so I was able to go and talk to our VFX supervisor and say, is this possible? What can you make? I mean, there's certain things, you know, when we're creating some creatures for episode 4, and he can say, you know, don't give it fur, don't give it feathers, because that's going to be, we can't afford that, or that's going to be tricky. So we try and make it as pragmatic as possible without restricting the sort of imaginative leap. So yeah, again, it's all about the communication and the team around you.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. You it's interesting with the music on the show as well, because there's a sort of wide variety of music. Nice to see that Phil Collins is still around.
Always good, yeah. Yeah, I wanted F3, yeah.
Did you leave? Was that left up to the director, or did you have any input in the music on the show?
I didn't. That was one of the editors came out in that particular sequence with Phil, and as soon as we dropped lovely Phil in, we were like, perfect. because there's something about that track that works so well. In terms of the composer Ed Butt that we work with, I mean, I really wanted to have a kind of orchestral sound to it, because I wanted that contrast between, it's quite a scruffy, grounded science fiction, and I wanted us to be able to go to some more epic, beautiful, dramatic places musically. So just to try and have, you know, the contrast between those two feels. So, and I love a big score sometimes with science fiction. I love that percussive energy sometimes. So that was one of the most exciting things in post, was working with the score and how it helps with the storytelling.
Yes, I will have to see if I can get hold of him, because I've interviewed, one of the things I do are behind the scenes interviews, and I've interviewed a ton of composers. So
he'd be great. I mean, he was absolutely tremendous to work with, and it was a real, you know, I think it's quite a tricky show to score, because tonally it is quite elastic. Like you said, there's some very sort of dark, humorous bits, and it is quite emotional. But I think he did a really good job. I'm very happy.
So you mentioned it's shot up in Manchester. Was it all shot up in Manchester, or were you moving around a bit?
We were moving around. So the set, the spaceship was in Manchester. A lot of our sets, the Commonwealth set was in Manchester. Obviously, Ep2, a lot of that was in Spain. In terms, and then Ep3, the big tunnels underneath, they were in Madrid. So in the first block, there's quite a lot of Spain as well, but mainly the sets and the interiors are rainy Manchester. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I was going to say, I mean, there's certainly the Ep2 stuff where you've got all the wind coming in. I mean, I know Manchester can be a bit of a desolate wasteland at times, but
no, that was El Maria in Spain. Yeah.
Right. Do you have a particular favorite character to write for on the show?
I absolutely love writing Tula, because she's so unapologetically awful some of the time. She's great fun to write for, and also the physicality and the commitment. I think she's tremendous. But actually, they're all good. They're all really good fun to write, because they're all so different. They're so different, and I think it's also, you know, an actress like Daney, who plays Genevieve. Once we started working with her, she's such a great physical performer that you start, once you start working on a show, you can start to write to the strengths of the actors, and that's one of the joys, you know. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to write all of them, but I do like, if I'm in a bad mood, Tula is the most fun to write for.
I was going to say, do you, once you know who's been cast in the role, do you end up tweaking the scripts towards their performances then?
All the time, yeah. You know, because you learn, you know, with an actor like Thomas Turgoose, his face is extraordinary, and his vulnerability is extraordinary. So quite often you're hacking away at the dialogue and go, Tomo can do that with his lovely, gorgeous face. He doesn't need all the words. So you learn to adapt. You try and have a soft back foot and learn to write to the strengths of your cast, which was easy with this cast because they're all great.
Yeah, I mean the cast is superb. I'm very much liking Echo. I think.
He's super. Yeah, he's one of those where when we were doing the casting, when Ollie, it was absolute sort of slam dunk. It was like he barely needed to say anything. And we're like, oh, we found him, because he's so utterly charming as an actor.
Yeah, I did wonder whether that. I mean, he's kind of comes across. I mentioned to Oliver himself. He's kind of a bit Han Solo-y.
Yeah, I mean,
there's almost a bit. Yeah, there's almost.
That was a very deliberate thing. I mean, we were like, I think we did put on the. I love those kind of characters that are just, you know, morally on the edge, but so utterly charming that you would follow them everywhere. And I think he brings that.
Yeah. There's sort of the hint of Jack Sparrow, I think, in there as well as the pirate. You know, same.
He's a pirate.
Yeah, very much so. You've been working on this. Presumably, you don't know whether you're waiting to see how well it goes down before you know whether.
Yeah. I mean, discussions are happening. We have a lot of cool stuff to play if we do go again, because. You know, with that ensemble, there's lots of stories to tell. So fingers crossed.
Was this all shot prior to lockdown?
No, we had, it was originally a 10 series, but we had to shut down the show at 8 episodes. So we have 2 scripts not yet shot, but luckily we had a quite a natural end to episode 8. So actually, I don't feel we were compromised really by COVID. So we were really, really lucky.
Okay, so that's good. So I also save you some work if you do come back.
Yeah, absolutely. We got some scripts in the pocket. So,
was there any particular scene that you wrote that you were kind of thinking, I'm really excited to see how this pans out on screen? Obviously, you can't talk about the later scenes, so it'd have to be something out of the first 3 episodes.
Oh, I think the stuff in episode 3 with the Phil Collins stuff that we're talking about, the heist episode, I was really excited about writing a heist episode with that sort of tension and trying to come up with those locations. And that was a lot of fun to write, because it's kind of action underpinned by emotional storytelling. So those were really exciting to write, because I think by the time you get to episode 3, the audience are very invested in those characters. So those obviously it's harder. The first episodes you're having to do a lot of world building and setup, but I think by the time you get to episode 3, you can kind of relax into those action sequences, knowing that the audience care about those characters. But I also, there's something absolutely joyful about writing a scene where the spaceship takes off, and then when you see them pull it out the bag in terms of VFX, it's like, well, I never knew that was going to work.
Yeah,
and it does.
Yeah. It must be the wonderful thing to kind of just write things down on the page and then suddenly they're there. And
yeah. It's so, but especially like episode 2 when the spaceship crashes into Paurosa. You only really see the final version of that quite late on in post, because there's so much VFX work, and then the music is doing a lot. So it's been so exciting to work in post on this project, because every time you see it in the edit, there's another layer, and you're sort of building it up, and that's been really thrilling.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the scene in what episode, the heist scene in episode 3, there's a very interesting moment for it's Verona, isn't it? That which seems to sort of switch her character in some ways, because she's a very kind of grey character in terms of you don't know which way she's going to leap. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that was one thing we were trying to find the truth in those characters and sit in the grey area, so that the white hat and the black hats wasn't so obvious, and that good people can do bad things and vice versa. So, and then you're trying to find actors that can really tread that line. And I think, Imogen Daines, who plays Verona, she's absolutely fantastic in that episode.
Yeah. You've got a great cast already, but moving forward, if you go to a second season and you had your choice of any British actor to put into the second season, who would you like to cast?
Oh, goodness. I mean, only because I'm watching Line of Duty at the moment, but I'd love to work with Vicky McClure.
Good choice.
I'd like, because she's just, I like those kind of, we've got a lot in this country, but those actors that absolutely commit. And I think she's one of those.
Yeah, I asked the same question to the cast, and they requested Dame Judy. So you got your work cut out. You got your work cut out.
Dame Judy and Vicky McClure, I'd be a happy girl. Yeah.
That would be awesome. All right, I think my time is up, but thank you for chatting with me.
Oh, thanks very much. Take care.